Well, the new boss of New York City's Housing Authority has now taken over. NYCHA Chairman Gregory Russ, selected by Mayor de Blasio to fix the city's troubled public housing agency, has been on the job for 7 weeks now.
So Russ is in charge of overseeing 175,000 apartments right here in New York City, a huge step from the 6,300 apartments under his watch at the Minneapolis Housing Authority. Is joining us this morning. Tell us how it's going. Welcome to Good Day New York. We're glad to have you on.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate being here, and I wanted to say I've had a great welcome here in New York, and people have been very generous, and the job is we're digging into it.
You said daunting when I asked you a little earlier.
Yeah, I mean, it's daunting in the sense that we have a scale like no other place in the country. And while the conditions and issues are very similar to some other housing authorities around the nation, this is unique in itself.
But 11,000 versus 400,000?
Well, don't forget, I also had time in Philadelphia, Chicago, and those were large portfolios as well. Not quite the scale of NYCHA, but those were very city, very urban situations, just similar to here.
You mentioned some of the issues that you're going to be focusing on. Legal Aid Society found that 90% of NYCHA apartments lost heat and hot water last winter. What will you do to make sure that doesn't happen this time around?
Well, that actually has been work that's been going on since the last heating season, even predating me. But we have changed a whole bunch of things, like we've changed shifts for the crews that are responsible for getting into those heat demands and work orders. We've changed the number of people that we have available. We've set up parts and mobile boilers if we need them. So there was a lot of contingency planning. In addition, we received about $20 million from the city to do really critical component repairs, and those were done along with inspections of the major components.
Since you're bringing up dollars, you know, there was a fair amount of criticism with your salary being at $402,000, more than the governor, more than your boss, the mayor, more than the president, and the justification for it.
Well, I think this is a difficult situation. First, no housing authority has ever had to work under a monitorship agreement like this one. So all the circumstances are familiar in one hand, but also very different from other efforts. And, you know, we reached agreement on what the terms would be to do the work. And
but also, you know, when you think about it also, but the terms you also still want to be with your family, right? So many people have said it's a full-time job. You need to be here all the time.
And I'm here very much. I'm not sort of absent, if that's the right word, because even if you're doing, even if you were upstate for a weekend, you're still on the phone or still checking, because I think that's part of the responsibility. So it's not like we're not in communication or somehow distant. That isn't the way it's working.
Another big complaint from some NYCHA tenants has to do with their appliances breaking, sinks not working, elevators going out of service. What will you do to kind of work on those issues?
So there's two demands on the Housing Authority right now. One is to meet the compliance requirements of the agreement, which touch on the things you just described, and basic services. I think the residents have a right to be disappointed in NYCHA because we have a lease with these families. That lease obligates us to do things that, like make sure they have a working stove and those kinds of things. So we have a basic service and compliance issue. And part of the reason we have that is, even as hard as you might try to stay even with those demands, the age of NYCHA stock and the lack of the capital investment, if these buildings were, if we had the opportunity, we'd have had 3 cycles of capital reinvestment for some of our properties. And we've only had sort of component reinvestment. We really need to come up with a stabilization plan to think about how do we give the families relief, and how do we address at the same time some of these really nagging and lingering issues in the buildings that caused the problems that created the agreement.
You did some of the touring, right, of
Yes,
some of the various properties. Now, you haven't stayed overnight like we saw Lynn Patton do.
No, I haven't.
Do you have any plans for doing something like that?
I do not. No, I have been out to many properties, talked to a lot of the resident leaders.
What are they telling you?
They're telling me that they're not happy with conditions, and that's understandable.
Could you get a better feel if you actually stayed there overnight and saw some of it?
You mean
some of the problems that exist on when you're not just making an announced tour and they've set up for you?
Well, we've done unannounced, and I did spend a Saturday afternoon at one of the properties with one of the resident leaders. So I will do that when I can do that, because I think seeing the property on a weekend or in an evening is a different feel. So I'm not unmindful of that. I just haven't pursued actually thinking about staying in an apartment or anything.
You talked about your first 100 days. You were really going to make some changes. You're at day 45, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
What's the top thing you have definitely changed?
We have, and this is like the least, so we have done a lot of restructuring internally to match up with the monitor and the compliance demands that the agreement has placed on us. I know that's not like,
it's not sexy, but
exactly. It's not at all. It's not at all. But
it's important.
It is, because we have a set of demands from the monitor, and we've organized to meet those.
All right. Gregory Russ, NYCHA chairman, thanks so much.